So, wow, it's nice to be here this afternoon. And hi to everyone. I hope you're enjoying your afternoon. It's a hot, sunny one where I'm coming from. And it's nice to meet you and direct from your homes, from our homes as well, me and Janice, to continue a conversation that has been going on and on. And of course, came up so strongly this time, during still this time of COVID, and about teenage pregnancies. And one of the things I personally like is, as much as we can talk about theory, what does the book say? What does the counselor say? What does the expert say? It's very important to hear from them. But I always feel it's even more important to hear from people who possibly have walked that path and or even others who are actually going on that path. So my name is Pauline for you viewers, and I'm hosting this show. And I'm joined by a beautiful lady called Janice. She'll be saying hello in a while. And yeah, it's always nice to come to you, and we're just gonna dive in. And then I think before I just do an intro about what we're going to talk about, I'll ask my guests to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Janice Njoroge. As Pauline has introduced me, Pauline and I know each other from way back, from high school days. So it's good to get reacquainted and to be having this conversation. As Pauline has rightly put it, it is very timely with everything that's happening around us. So thank you for having me, Pauline.
You're welcome. And thank you for accepting to come. I mean, I know opening up your life to people and people just hearing, and many others will continue hearing even now, is not, it's a privilege to, I don't take it for granted. So, yeah, so I want to begin by saying, as much as we'll continue talking about teenage pregnancy and about teenagers and sex, because of course, like I said last time, and we all know, pregnancy comes through sex. So it's actually teenagers and sex. And so one of the things I want us to be aware of is there are some children, there are some teenagers. I mean, teenagers are still children who are able to navigate teenage very well. Very well, I mean, they are able to get through, possibly without even engaging in sex, having an intimate relationship, kissing, and doing all those things that would happen along teenage. But then again, there's another group which is not able to navigate well, and it is not entirely their problem. It could be their personality. They're just not able to go through it without maybe getting soaked in it, getting soaked in the challenge of it, getting peer pressure, and then they just happen to get in and they cannot navigate well. And so we need to know that. And I think what is most important for us to know as parents is that we can then not afford to group people, to group even our own children. I could have 2, 3, or 4 children. I cannot say I will parent them the same. The principles may be the same, but it may be different on each and every child. And that's why you find there are children who actually will manage going through boarding school. There's a child you take to boarding school and it messes them up completely. So it's not about the boarding school. It's not about maybe even you, because that's the best you as a parent thought. My children need to be in boarding school. But the character of that child, maybe the child is easily gullible. What the other peer, what the other friend says is what goes. So they want to be good, and so they'll do it. Everybody is saying, during the weekend, I had sex. You haven't had sex. And so the child feels left out and wants to try it out. But there's another child who will say, no, I can't do that. I mean, why would I do that? Will be stronger to do it. There are other children who are sensitive children. Once the trust is broken, picking it up again from them is difficult. And so they'll just go there and exploit whatever is outside there. So I think we need to realize that children navigate teenage differently. And I think what is good to appreciate, yesterday I was talking to a parent of a teenager, and there's something she said that I really liked. is that her son was meeting a girl in the afternoon yesterday. Of course, she's like, okay, I'm really praying that they are behaving. But then she said, but I'm happy that she's meeting a girl and not a boy. And not to say that he doesn't have boyfriends, he does, but she's happy to know that her son is getting attracted to a girl, because it's attraction, it's part of the growing up. That's how God created us. There's really nothing we can do about it. So the attraction is okay. And a boy admiring and a girl being a teenage girl being admired and feeling things, if I may say, feeling, I mean, I want to be touched. It is okay. That's just how we are created. I think for me, the problem is when we then arouse love before time, and time is in marriage. So when we arouse it before and it's aroused before by the young people, they're not able to be strong, I mean, to push through, then that's where the challenge comes in. And of course, what is coming out is the pregnancy bit. But is it only about pregnancy? Remember, I said they could be taking, what are they called? The pills, so that they are not pregnant morning after. Some are even going for contraceptives, 5-year contraceptives, so that they can be in school and not get pregnant. But is it only about pregnancy? Because of course, when you start engaging in sex early, that affects you even later. You become maybe addicted to several partners. You cannot be faithful then to your partner when you're married. There are so many other things. So let's look at it bigger. It's not just a pregnancy, but there's more to it. And so then what then do we do? Is there anyone to blame? I mean, I think that's where the conversation is at. What happens? Where do we go from here? Because we are going to have our teenagers. I am going to parent teenagers one day. So what happens right there? So that's why I thought, let me bring in Janice. Let me hear her journey. And maybe the first thing I would want to ask Janice is, Janice, take us through your teenage life.
Thank you, Pauline, and for that intro and putting it in context, because I agree with you on a number of things, that it's not just about sex, it's what the consequences of that action are in terms of relationships with the person you're having sex with, but also with your family. How does that affect school and things like that? And I hope we'll get to discuss that a little bit more. But my teen years were, the initial years, I think from like 13, those were okay. I think for me, life became a little bit difficult for me as a teen when I went into high school. There's a lot of ujuaji that comes with feeling that now, you're away in boarding school. I mean, Pauline, you and I were in the same school, and being away from your parents. But generally, I've been brought up with just my sister and I, my sister Janet and I. So we were only 2 children, and our parents were both present in our lives. An average family. My mom is a very strong Christian, so we've been brought up in a Christian household. The word of God was always the thing to discuss at home. But as I grew older into my teens and sort of on a journey of self-discovery, I started asking certain questions that were not necessarily always well received. I struggled with my relationship with church. We were required to go to church every Sunday. And for me, it was such a drag. I'm like, why do we why is this? So that already started causing friction for me and my mom. And then I think around the time when I was going into high school, I also started having a difficult relationship with my father. So I remember there are times he would even come to visit me in school, and I'm like, just drop what you brought for me there at the gate, because we had a difficult relationship. So when I then finished high school and then I was at home for a while before I joined campus, I think that was when that rebelliousness really, really checked in. I didn't feel that my parents understood me. I didn't even feel as if they were even bothered to hear my perspective on certain issues. So it caused me to rebel. Oh, and did I rebel? Yeah, I actually did quite a bit. And it's unfortunate, but I feel that was a necessary process in very many ways, because right now, when I look back, I think it only served, ultimately, when we work things out, it served to strengthen those relationships ultimately. But unfortunately, that's not always the case for everybody who goes through that phase. Yeah. So it was mixed. Yeah. It was nice in the early ages, getting to discover being a young woman. But then when I had an opportunity to exercise a little freedom, quote unquote, I really went all out. Really did.
You went all out.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us an example
Oh
of the
yeah.
freedom?
For example, when I joined campus, so my mother was very strict. So even when my friends would talk about going for this thing that used to happen on Sundays, anyway, when people would go out, I was not allowed. Yani, I was that person who I would try and have that conversation with my parents. They were not listening. They were not hearing it. So what I ended up doing is either lie about going to church for some activity in the afternoon for youth. Hey, kumbe, me and my friends are, out. And it kind of grew, when you get away with one lie, then you're like, okay, let me push it a little bit. Let me get into this other level. So I'd give lies so that I can be out with my friends and we'd go out partying, or I'd say I'm doing a sleepover at my friends. And we are not really at a sleepover. We'll sleep, but at like 2 in the morning when we get back home. So, and that was really because some of those things were not conversations we were going to have at home. But I felt like I was being denied something that I thought was really important for me to do at that point. So the little lies, having to sneak behind my parents' back. Then when I went into campus and I was a boarder in campus, then I had a lot of freedom. I remember taking fewer units, so then I don't have to be in class on Monday and on Friday. So then I can enjoy my weekend. And that's not really the best use of even the resources that my parents had invested for my education. But I felt that I had been missing out on something and it was time to make up for lost time. Yeah.
So when you said you're going for a church thing, they would allow you.
Yeah,
But
they would.
they would.
Yeah.
But what would they just if you wanted to meet your friends, would they just say no and no explanation?
Well, it depends on the friends, because there are some friends that my mom and especially my mom, because my dad most of the days he's not at home, right? He was at work and all. But my mom tended to know my friends a little bit more. So, and there are certain friends she completely disapproved of. And as a teen, those are the ones you want to be friends with because you want to understand. So why? Okay, what is it that she sees that I don't see? Let me prove her wrong. That's the other way of looking at it. So for me, it was even the friends, sometimes some of my friends would come over and after they've gone, or when they walk in, you'd see my mom is change and, she'd get like really upset or would have a conversation later and she'd like, I don't want to see you hanging out with that girl, or she's not a good influence. And I'm like, what do you know? At that point in my naivety. So, but to be honest, as I grew older and I started being being critical even about the kind of friendships that I had, she was actually right about many of those friendships. Some of them have fallen off along the way, naturally, but others I have been deliberate about them now that I'm older. So in most cases, she was right. It's just the way the information was presented and packaged that made it difficult for me to swallow. And then that became the basis of a lot of rebellion on my part.
So I like that. I like what you said. It was the parents were correct, but the way they brought it to you was the problem.
Sorry, say that again. I kind of lost
So
you there.
what I got from you is that you said, yes, your parents may have been correct that maybe the friends you are with were not of good influence, but the challenge was how they brought it out to you.
Yeah, because it was never a discussion. It was not a conversation about, tell me about this friend. What is it about them that makes you want to be their friend? Do you know where they come from? Do you know their parents? And those are questions that are important to ask because then that gives you an insight into what kind of home that person is coming from. What do they like? What do you do when you hang out together? Do you guys talk about, for example, my mom would have been very happy to hear if I said that me and my friends are talking about God or we are doing something like that. So that's how you I would rather have had that conversation approached as opposed to saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Yeah.
Mm. So there was a lot of don't.
A lot,
Okay.
a
So
lot.
let me take you back, Janice, to, you said when you joined high school, you already didn't have a good relationship with your dad. What would maybe would have caused that? Maybe just before you joined, what is that would have caused that?
So it was a misunderstanding really, that then I carried in my heart for many years. I remember after finishing class 8, in that period before going to high school, I remember going out with a friend of mine, and not going out far. This person was our neighbor, and I went and I stayed a little bit later than I should have. So I got home quite late, and my parents, as much as they reprimanded me for it at that moment in time, they didn't say much about it. So then fast forward to January of that year, or the following year, when I'm getting ready to go to high school, I got quite unwell, I was throwing up, I couldn't put food, I couldn't keep food down. And my dad then decided to take me to see a doctor. So when we went to see the doctor, I remember overhearing one of the tests that the doctor was asked to do is a pregnancy test. And I'm like, wait, hold up. What do you mean a pregnancy test? How? Then, I kind of drew the dots, together after a while. And when I got the results, of course, I knew I wasn't pregnant. I had not had sex at that point, but I felt mistrusted. And I felt that as much as if you'd have asked me, I would have told you, no, I haven't, or that's not something you should worry about. So it turns out when the results came out that I actually had an ulcer that was just forming, and that's why I was getting so sick. But then now from that moment in time, and it's not something that even my mother and I discussed. So from that moment in time, even as I went off into high school, I had such bitterness in my heart. And that made it very difficult for me to have a cordial relationship with my dad, because I felt that he didn't trust me. So what's the point of even having any conversations here? And in my heart, I knew that if somebody would have actually just asked me, then I would have told them the truth. So then that took a while to deal with. And as a teenager, you also want to cause maximum injury to your parents because you feel they've inflicted the same on you. So oh my God, I was terrible. I was terrible. It's regrettable, but yeah, that's actually what happened. So it's only until maybe around the time when I was going into campus that our relationship somewhat got better, but then after a short while, it also got bad. But yeah.
Wow. So I get, I pick, you felt mistrusted. You felt that he could ask for a pregnancy test and he hadn't actually even asked you.
Yeah.
So as a teen at that, as a teen at that point, you felt like, I mean, it was also embarrassing that he would say it and you had not known. He had actually not told you that he would have asked about that, had he?
No, he hadn't. We hadn't talked about it. We never spoke about it even after that. In fact, when I got the results, because he had to leave to go to the office, so the results were given to me. And I remember seeing the results, and later in the evening, I'm like, here are your results. You're the one who wanted them. Here are your results, Yeah, so it's that lack of trust that really, and at that point, I had not done anything yet to earn any mistrust, Yeah.
What did you put any mental notes after that? Like, okay, so this is what you thought. What did you carry forward from that?
Well, I guess when I was in high school, it didn't bother me much in terms of what I'd want to do after that. But I kept thinking to myself, the day when I can actually have sex, I will do it. I'm actually going to do it just because then I can be told that, you've had sex. Yeah, then let's have that conversation then. But before then, there was really nothing to discuss. But for me, it just became that sort of like a growing, I don't call it a resentment, but it's bitterness, and with time, it becomes so big that it becomes difficult to have any conversations about any other issues. I think it's probably when my sister joined high school with me that then things kind of got better, because then we would sit down and talk, because it would be the two of us and my dad. or my mom when she managed to come, and we would then now sit, but it was only because of my sister, really.
Wow. Okay, we'll get back to that. Now, tell me, Janice, at what point did your parents talk to you about sex? When was sex mentioned in your family?
We never talked about sex, to be honest. I don't have a single memory of when we talked about sex in the sense that this is what sex means. This is the time we feel would be appropriate to have sex. Any references? My mom is a teacher, was a teacher. Now she's retired, and she had this amazing relationship with the children that she taught. But I always felt that, okay, maybe that's the kind of relationship that we could have as well here at home. So even when it comes to conversations about sex, sex is bad. I mean, when there were references about it, sex is bad, it's wrong, you could get pregnant, and that could be embarrassing, and things like that. It came, yes, I know it didn't come from a bad place. It's the knowledge or information that my parents felt that they had at that moment in time. But we never at any one point sat down to discuss sex, at least not in the context that, say, my daughter and I or my daughter and her friends talk about it. That never happened. I just knew sex was bad. It was painful. Oh, that's the other thing. It was painful. And yeah, it's that thing that we shouldn't do.
Exactly. Wow, interesting. How are you talking about it with your friends? Were you talking when you're teens with your other friends? What were you talking about sex?
Well, we'll talk about boys. We'll talk about boys and how that boy is, or you have a crush on and things like that. But we never really spoke about sex per se, because remember, now we're in the same age group. So we are all pretty much coming from homes where sex is a taboo subject. It's not something you would discuss with your parents. And even if any of my friends had more information about sex than the rest of us did, it's not the kind of conversation we would have had at that point, because we would judge each other, So we never really talked about it at that age, but as we grew older, then it became kind of normal conversations for us. But in those initial stages, it was not something we really discussed at all. Yeah. But it's very different now, I know. The dynamic.
Yeah, it is very different.
Today's teenagers is very different.
When you had conversations over your parents, what were people saying about their parents when they were at that point?
So I remember there's this one particular friend of mine who had a very dynamic relationship with her parents, and I know they would talk about it sometimes. And I always felt that her parents were a lot more liberal than mine. So I mean, she was allowed to go out, and she was allowed to have a boyfriend. I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend at all, but I still had boyfriends, those ones you would hold hands with, at the corner, and nothing. It's very innocent. But if my mom ever found me standing outside with a boy, oh my God, the eyes, those eyes that tell you stick to your lane. So whenever I used to look at my friend, and my friend's like, oh, this boy came over, and I'm like, what? You mean your parents actually allowed a boy to come over? And I was always very envious of that dynamic, yeah? We never really talked about what they talked about in terms of sex, but for me, it was enough that their parents were allowing them to bring boys over. That was such a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, you see, if my mom allowed a boy to come over, and those are the things we talk about, if my mom allowed a boy to come over, then we would be having conversations in their presence, or they will not be ever too far away. So you never have to worry about what is happening. So I still feel that also caused now that difficult relation, because I'm like, why can't my mom be so-and-so's mom, Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, so you finish high school, you go through high school. So take us through, just let's continue with the journey.
So back then we used to live in Ozero, and I remember where we used to live. Just after I finished high school, there was a certain gentleman who used to live in an apartment above ours, and after high school, that's when you're mboching in the real sense, kazi ya kufua nguo, everything, that's you. So I used to be outside there in my whole innocence, doing laundry. This guy who is just checking Janice out and everything. So then he started coming on to me, started hitting on me, and he was relatively older than me. I think he was about 9 years older than me. But he was working, he had a good job, and I was in such awe. And I'm like, oh my God, that guy actually likes me. So he and I started a relationship that only got a little bit more intense when I went to campus, and I was in boarding I was boarding, and now I think at some point my parents found out about that relationship, and oh no, I was told this guy is even older than you. Do you know what you're doing? You know, you could get pregnant, all those things. And I'm like, no, I mean, then I thought I was in love. I'm like, but I love him and I care about him and all those things. I remember there's even one time I think I was beaten by my mom, in my whole 18 years of age, and that made me even want to pursue this relationship even more. So I think he and I at some point had a conversation, because I told him my parents don't approve of our relationship. And he said, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll probably move from here so that then we can have a little bit more, not have to worry about your parents and things like that. So he moved to a different part of Nairobi. And so what would happen is every weekend or so, every 2 weekends, I would leave campus and go over to his house and go see him and spend the weekend with him, and then go back to school either on Sunday afternoon or on Monday morning, depending on whether I had classes. Now, during that time, I think in January of 2001, I had missed my period, and I'm like, okay, this is a bit weird, this is a bit off. And I remember getting a friend of mine to take me to get a pregnancy test. And I remember we went to, I'll never forget, we went back then at the mall, at the front side of the mall, there used to be a chemist that was there. So we actually went to that chemist and bought a pregnancy test, went home, I took the test, and it was actually positive. And I remember feeling nothingness. I'm like, oh, okay, so the test is positive. But it never really sank in fully. I told my friend also that test is positive, and she's like, so what are you going to do? I'm like, I am going to tell this guy that I'm pregnant and hear what he says. But it really, I guess it's because it hadn't really sunk in. So it did not faze me. And it was still early. In my head, I'm like, anything can happen. I mean, you know, between now and then, anything can happen. I could wake up and tomorrow I'm not pregnant. Who knows? Naivety. So then I told this gentleman that I was actually pregnant, and he, I mean, after getting over the initial shock, he's like, okay, fine. This is what we're going to do. We're going to get married. We're going to raise that child. You know, I'm going to go and tell your parents. And I'm like, hey, hold up. I am 19. I am not getting married at 19. At least that for me was very clear. He's like, so what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do this? How do you want to manage this? And I remember telling him, I can't have a child right now. I can't have a child at 19. And I remember the poor guy, he's like, so what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? I told him, I'm not too sure what I want to do, but I just know that I can't have a child. And I told him, and I don't want you to interfere with me trying to figure out what I want to do. I think the best thing for us is to stop seeing each other. So that I kind of put a pause to that relationship. So I went through the better part of 2001, knowing that I was pregnant, but still in some form of denial. And because then when I think maybe 3 months in, I was like, oh my God, now it'll start showing. My pregnancy will start showing. My parents, oh my God, my very strict parents, my very strict mother. This will be an embarrassment for her. I'll be embarrassing my family. And so what I used to, so this time I've now gone back to school, right? I've gone back into campus. And I remember it being the farthest thing from my mind on most days, but then on other days, it would really, really overwhelm me. Other than this one friend of mine that I told about, I hadn't talked to anybody about it. I did not speak to anybody about it until I was 8 months pregnant. Now, what happened during that time is what I do is, because I was so scared of gaining weight and my pregnancy showing, I would eat a proper meal, and I didn't want to arouse any suspicion around me. I'd eat with everybody, I'd have a proper meal, and then now wait until the coast is clear. Then I go to the loo, finger in my mouth, throw up. So then I don't put on weight. I mean, what a way to live, you know? Then I remember during those times we'd have our break between May and August. So I remember during that time, I think I went to visit my auntie in Eldoret. My auntie was living in Eldoret. I visited another auntie of mine who was in Nakuru, my sister and I. And I think when I was in Eldoret, I think my aunt kind of got a glimpse, and you know, and I remember her asking me a question. She's like, "Are you okay? You've umenona?" And I'm like, So that caused me even not to put down any more food anymore. So I was still, so my pregnancy wasn't showing, honestly, it wasn't. And I did a good job of covering it up. I'd wear baggy shirts. I remember my dad used to work with Toyota Kenya, and they used to wear uniforms. So when he'd passed down his shirts to us, to my sister and I. So I remember I used to wear those, and they're big and baggy, so it kind of concealed pregnancy. And then I went back to school in August of 2001. And I remember because then first years would report like a week before the rest of us. So I remember when we went back to school, I remember hearing a story, I don't know whether it's true or not, of some girl who had reported, a fresher who had reported to school. And when she was, I think maybe a couple of days in, she went into labor and she had to be taken to hospital using the university ambulance. And rumor has it that immediately she was admitted, she was given a suspension letter. And then I think that was the first time, expulsion, not suspension, expulsion. And I think for me, that is the first time it hit me. And I was like, this could be you. Miss Thing, this could be you. You need to talk to somebody about this. I mean, after all, you're still pregnant. This is about 8 months right now. So I found the courage. It was oh my God, it was difficult to have that conversation with my parents, first with my mom, and then now with my mom and dad. And I remember feeling very helpless because I'm like, oh my God, this is the end. Like, this is it. My parents are going to disown me. And those are the things I was worried about. And that's why I kept it to myself for such a long time. My parents are going to disown me. They want nothing to do with me. I'm an embarrassment. It's such a shame. My mom is a Christian. Here I am. All those things. But I thank God for grace because I didn't see it coming. But I remember my dad being very, very clear on that evening when we had sat having that conversation. My dad asked me one question. He was like, have you gone to the hospital? I'm like, no. So this is a 19-year-old girl, pregnant, 8 months, never been to ANC, not at all, you know, struggling to not eating right because I'm afraid to put on weight and show. So I remember my dad then saying 3 things. And the 3 things he said were, number 1, it has happened. So, I mean, we can sit here and tell you we are disappointed. All those things are true, we are. But the reality is there's nothing we can do at this point to change it. So what I would, you and your mom, you know, at that time also for fathers, they're like, now this is your mother's problem, you know, so you and your mom will figure out how you go and get, you know, to an ANC clinic or something. And then he said, number 1, the fact that you're here having this conversation with me alone, and yet I know you did not get pregnant alone, means that that person who is responsible either doesn't care or is irrelevant. So that is what I know as your father, and that is the way things will be. That was number 1. Number 2, he said, immediately after you have this child, you are going to go back to school. I don't know how you're going to work it out to explain where you are to the school administration, but you are going to go back to school. And then number 3, he said, I and your mother are going to look after this child and look after you until the day you're in a position to do so yourself. And to be honest, because of where my head was at that point, I'm like, yes, 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 yes to everything. It is not the response I was expecting. So for me, it was such a huge relief. And then, of course, now I had to tell my sister. My sister was there with us in that conversation. And I remember my sister, because she went to bed before me. I remember when I went to bed, I found a note on my bed that my sister had left. She's like, don't worry, sis, I'm going to support you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my younger sister. So I felt very supported. And I remember asking myself, so why didn't I talk about this sooner? So I think I only made it to one ANC clinic, I think the following week. And then my daughter was born.
Wow, wow.
A bouncing 3.9 kg child at 3.9 kgs, even I could not believe it. I'm like, what? But it was also very surreal for me, because even when I went through the motions of labor and all that, I'm just like, okay, I have this pain. I have this pain down here. It feels like a cramp, but I'm not too sure. My mom was like, that's labor, you know? I had no knowledge, none whatsoever, about what the pregnancy journey itself, about being a mother. And I remember when my child was born and the nurses were trying to put her to my breast so that she can start feeding. And I remember them kemeaing me because they're like, kwani wewe hujui hizi vitu? And I'm like, no, I don't. How would I know these things, you know? So yeah.
Wow, wow.
My daughter was born. Yeah.
It's very, I must say, the way your parents received it was really, really good, and it never, it built you. I mean, like, you maji yakimwagika ayazoleki. I really like that. Wow.
Yeah.
So you have your baby. So what do you feel, Janice, having taken us through your teenage and relationship with your parents? What you feel what do you think would have been different, would have been done differently?
I feel that conversations around relationships, around sex, should have been had, and in the manner that allows you to ask questions, to, you know, have candid conversations about them. I wish I had had an opportunity to have that kind of conversation with my parents, and maybe, I'm not too sure, but I mean, if it's ordained to happen, it probably would have. But I think that would have helped me make a lot more informed decisions about relationships, and not run into the first relationship with a guy who shows interest, you know. Relationship conversations about what a healthy relationship looks like, what issues around consent are, and I'm not saying I was in any way coerced to have sex, but those are fundamental, because when I look at even my relationships post having my daughter, they haven't been the best, because they're dynamics that I feel are a parent's responsibility that I've had to learn on my own by being practically in the front line, you know, and going through those motions myself. I just wish that we had had those conversations then. But post having my child, I think my parents then did everything that they could to ensure that we both had what we needed. And our relationship, especially my relationship with my mother, has significantly improved. And now we are able to talk about things that we weren't able to talk about before. I think she's also gotten a little bit more open-minded about seeing things. And that happens with time. But you also run the risk of there being a lot of damage done beforehand that it becomes almost impossible to correct. But yeah, those are the things I really wish we had talked about back then.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So now you're a parent too. So your daughter is now a teenager.
Yeah,
So
she's turning 19 in October.
She's turning 19
in September.
when you're 19. Wow, wonderful. Just take us, how has your parenting journey been? And then possibly just diving now to you parenting her as a teenage. How has it been?
I am very thankful that I've had a lot of support. The commitment that my dad made, and by extension my mom, on that night when I told them, they honored it to the letter. I remember my dad taking my daughter and I to our postnatal clinics, to all her immunizations and things like that. And they have really walked this journey with me. So I cannot fully take credit for the amazing young woman that my daughter has become. A lot of it has to do with the foundation that my parents helped to set in her early years. So my daughter lived with my parents for quite a while, because when I started working and I was I was very eager to move out of my parents' house. Because even then, remember, I'm still a young person there. I still wanted to party. I have a child at home. I still wanted to hang out. And we had an amazing nanny who did an amazing job raising Sylvia. But I was eager to enjoy what life had to offer. So I would really party hard with my friends, come home in the morning, and that would cause conflict with my parents. So at the earliest opportunity, when I had some income, I really focused on moving out of home. And then I told my parents, okay, now I'm ready to move out and I want to move out with my daughter. They're like, no, you go settle down first, set up a home for yourself, and then maybe we can have the conversation. Because I mean, she became like that child there. So during those years, I'd visit, and every weekend I'd go see my daughter. I'd take her, she'd come, she'd stay with me for the weekend. During the holidays, she'd stay on with me for a little bit longer. But it wasn't until my daughter, I wouldn't say that I was really parenting as such. I mean, yes, I was providing. I'd make sure when she was using diapers, there were diapers available. When she needed school fees paid, I'd pay the school fees. When she needed, I would provide those things, but I was not present. And it's only when then that she started living with me, I think she was about 9, when she started living with me, that then we started getting to know each other and started bonding. And I am so grateful to God because my daughter and I have never lacked a thing when it comes to my daughter. We've never lacked school fees. I've pretty much been doing this on my own since then. And it's been a great joy just walking this journey with her. She's an amazing young girl, very open-minded, she asks questions and she's very curious about life. And that has sort of made my parent-daughter dynamic a lot easier. So we've had our difficult moments, especially when she was in high school, because then she went off to a boarding school and that's not something that she wanted to do. And that caused a little bit of drama for us. But we maneuvered, and we walked through that. And here we are, this young, amazing girl is going into university. And I'm very proud of the young woman that she's become. And I think that I've also had a lot of help from my friends as well. When I had to travel, some of my friends would actually host her and they would stay with her. Or my friends who are working abroad in a different country would say, oh, let her come over for the holidays. Let's spend some time together. So it's been really good, honestly. And I wouldn't even compare it to the kind of challenges I had with my parents when I was a teenager.
Wow. Yeah. What would you say that you did with your daughter during teenage that was different? Okay. Would your parents approve of everything you did with her?
Oh no, there are very many things, even today, that my parents don't approve of, including where she wants to go to university. But ultimately, we've made our relationship is built on friendship. Yes, I'm her mother, but we are friends and we talk about things and we have candid conversations. Yes, there's still times we'll have difficult conversations and I will have to put on the mom hat and be like, no, this is what we are going to do. But our relationship is a friendship first. And I believe that my daughter can come to me with any issues that she has or she's worried about. I have gotten to learn who her friends are. I've gotten to know them. In fact, I'm always encouraging her. I'm like, oh, what have you spoken to so-and-so? When was the last time you spoke to them? No, I think you need to call her. I think she's a nice girl, things like that. So our conversations, I know her friends. I know their parents. I know where they live. And some of their parents I talk to. And it's important because my parents never really did that. And for me, doing that allows me some greater insight into my daughter's life, into her friend's life. And therefore you can pick out things that you feel that are going astray. So I think building a friendship with her has really been what has defined my journey as a parent. And it has really made things easier for us.
Wow. So when did you talk about sex to her in her early teenage years?
Yeah, we did. We talked about sex. And I remember, because there's a cousin of mine who was also living with us who lived with us for a couple of years. I remember talking to the two of them. And And the conversation was, number one, sex is not bad. Sex is not bad. Sex is one of the most beautiful and intimate expressions of love, but it has to be done at the right time. And the right time, and it's not about me saying, and I was like, so what do you think is the right time? And they're like, oh, I need to have finished school. I need probably to be working. And this information comes from them. It's not me prescribing, and then making sure that they also have information about that sex needs to be, if you're not ready to get pregnant, then maybe you shouldn't be having sex. But then that's also an opportunity to talk about what safe sex is, and open up that conversation. So that's how we maneuvered that. And it was not about waiting for that one moment to have the talk. It's finding opportunities in everyday conversations or in things that you're engaging in together. And if you're friends with this child, you will probably spend a lot of time together. You'll get to know their interests. You'll get to know the things that they like. You will sit down and watch a TV show together. And if there's a topic there of interest, you can then build on that as something to initiate a conversation. But I think the biggest challenge, I think, for parents is, number one, okay, what is the right time? It can't be a one-time thing. It's something you have to do consistently over time. And when you find an opportunity to have this conversation in a setting that is, relaxed, then it becomes a lot easier. So yes, we do have candid conversations. We have candid conversations about menstrual health hygiene. And those are things that I never got to discuss with my mom, for example. So she understands, and it's then now her decision now to decide, because she has the information that she needs, and will continue to provide that information to her as she grows older, because then the dynamics continue to change. And I think now the next big thing is around what is the definition of a healthy relationship, because I think that's something else that probably, yes, so a child can know everything they need to know about sex, but what about a relationship that is healthy? That is very important. That a relationship that is devoid of abuse, a relationship that honors consent, being with somebody who honors your decisions and your choices. Those are also important things to have in the larger umbrella of talking about sex to our children, so that then when the time comes and they feel that they're ready to have a relationship, that they know the things they need to look out for, and they can be sure that those are the bare minimums for them. They're like, okay, if this is somebody who doesn't respect my choices, then we cannot be together. If this is somebody who does not, who doesn't honor consent, when I say no, it means no, then that's not somebody. Or even issues about sexual harassment and things like that. Those are conversations that my daughter and I continue to have. Yeah.
Wow. So it's a continuous, it's not a one-stop. Like we've talked about it, you should know it. It's a day-to-day, is a continual. Yeah. Wow, I like that. Allow me to take you a little back, because a parent listening may want to hear. You talked about she was in boarding and never really liked it. How are you able to maneuver that? Is there an agreement you had, or how did you maneuver that?
So she got, we got her into a very good school, according to my standards as a parent. But she wanted to go to a different school, but then unfortunately we couldn't secure a place for her there. So I told her, you know what, you go to this school, let's see how it works out. And then if it doesn't work out, then we'll see what we can do. So she went to this school and she did not like it. I think in Form 1 and Form 2, I probably went to pick her up every single term, maybe 2 times or 3 times, because if she's unwell or something is happening. And then after a while, also as a parent, you can discern certain things. And I'm like, I know where the problem is. At that point, I had to make it very clear. I'm like, you know what? We are not changing schools at this point. We are not going to change schools. So I need you to go back and put your effort into it. Get through this, because it was causing me a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And she wasn't too far away from me. She was still within Nairobi, but she did not enjoy it. And actually, I think it wasn't until maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago that we had a conversation. And then I got to understand the things that were actually happening then that made it difficult for her. And my thought then, what I asked is like, why didn't you tell me this then? She's like, oh, I could see, I know how much effort you've put into this, I didn't want to disappoint you and everything. I felt a little bit disappointed there though, but because I kind of thought we had that relationship, but she's like, I knew even if I told you, you are not going to change schools for me. So she let that be. But what we then agreed is that when it's time for her to go to uni, I will let her choose her university of choice and based on what it is she wants to do, of course, with guidance. And that's exactly what we've done. We looked at a number of different options for university, and I told her, okay, based on what you want to study and where you see yourself in another couple of years, pick the best university. Don't worry about cost first, pick the university, and then now let's work through these other things. And we had a short list, and we finally agreed on one. And that's the one I'm saying my parents don't agree with, but we have made that decision, and it's something I intend to honor because it's what I had to give, and I wouldn't call it a bribe because I have been involved in getting her to make a decision. And we were not just looking at one option, we're looking at a number of them. So it was sort of a middle ground for us so that then she can settle in, be in school in her head as well. And she did it and she made it through. And I kept telling her, this is not going to last. It will be over very soon. Yeah, and it was. And here we are getting ready to go to university.
Wow. To her choice of university.
To her university.
I love that. Wow, wonderful. So Janice, what would you tell a teenager out there right now? I know there are teenagers who are listening or maybe who will listen later. What would you tell them?
Teens, your parents only have your best interests at heart, honestly. Sometimes we as parents have very strange ways of showing it, and we may not always say the right things, but I think all parents have your best interests at heart. But it's also important for you then to make it easy for your parents to get to know you as well. I've seen teenagers who completely shut their parents out, and they may have had reasons. And I tried to do it as well to a large extent with my parents, but it does you a disservice because there's the one person you should have in your corner should always be your parent. And I'd encourage teenagers to identify opportunities to have conversations with their parents. Yeah, I know many of us are busy, we have busy schedules and everything, but think about it as a relationship like any other. Think about it as a relationship with your friend, for example, where you actually have to put in time. You have to call your friends, you have to find out how they're doing, send a text or whatever, or meet up. Try and create those opportunities. Ask your mom or your dad, oh, can we do something together this weekend? And then use that opportunity to have a conversation. And sometimes parents, we are not always ready to listen, but now that's my thing to tell parents. Be open to spending not just time, but quality time with your children, because that's the only time you will get to know what's really happening, how they think, what their aspirations are, and do not shy away from sharing personal experiences, because then your children now start connecting with you as somebody who's done stupid things in the past, and therefore you're coming from a place of, I've made some mistakes as well, and not being shy to tell them what those are. It doesn't take anything away from you as a parent. If anything, your child is like, oh my God, you did that, and here you are now. Oh, wow, that's amazing. How did you manage to do that? Like, oh, even if it's something like, for example, sometimes when I have a hard day at work or I have an interesting situation at work, in the evening, I'll tell my daughter about it and she'll ask me questions. So my daughter actually knows a lot about the work that I do, and she's passionate about it. And I've seen her always ask for opportunities to volunteer and do things, but it's only because it's very intentional to open up my life to her, not my life as her parent, but my life as Janice Njoroge. And this is what I've been dealing with. And then it makes it easy to then apply certain things, or for them to look at things and ask questions, and for you to ask them questions as well. So it works both ways. Teenagers, you have to reach out to your folks and tell them what you desire, that in terms of spending time with them and having conversations. But parents, we also have to be open to that. We can never be too busy for our children. we can't.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, amazing. Yeah, I was just about to ask you what you tell the parent, but I'm sure you've put it together with that. So yeah, Janice, we've come to the end, and I'm sure you have a parting shot. And so I'll hand it over to you to give us a parting shot, then I'll give up mine, and then we end.
Okay. I think my parting shot is that many of the things that we've done in our past, only serve to build us for the future, including the mistakes, including what we may think are mistakes. I mean, for me, when I got pregnant, I thought it was the end of the world. I really did. And I thought this was it. My parents are going to kick me out, and that. But God's plan is so much greater than our fears, And He had such a great plan, because then my daughter then became the thing that has focused my life around, in terms of ensuring that I'm a good example, even my work ethic, knowing that I'm the one who's providing for this child and wanting to pursue my goals, so that then I am an inspiration for her. So let not the mistakes of our past be what we perceive to curtail our growth and the growth of our relationships. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very, very, very much. My parting shots are two. I think just based on your journey with us, the issue of trust, us building and keeping our trust with our children. I really caught that when just going to hospital, your dad asking for a pregnancy test to be done and hadn't told you, that really caused a lot of issue and you wanting to rebel. And so for me, I think us here, me as a parent, you out there as a parent, let's keep that trust. It may look like it doesn't really matter, but it may cost so much on your relationship and mind. They may want to tell you something, but they can't tell you because they know you. I could go out there and just tell it out there. And then the other thing I picked was the packaging. The packaging of, I just don't have to tell my daughter, that child, that friend of yours is not, I don't want you going. So why? Fine, it's a good thing, and I have the best interest at heart as a parent, but how my child takes it is not the same way. I mean, they think I don't love their choices, I don't love their friends, yet I have friends myself. So it's not it I could be correct, but how I package it is the issue. I really, really like that. And of course, the conversation that it's not a one day, it's not a one time, it's looking for a conducive time, even maybe setting up a time, just checking up on your child. So where we at, that conversation we had with your boyfriend, And I think I also like what I shared about my friend. First of all, acknowledging to your child that that it is okay to feel attracted to the other person. I mean, you don't want your child getting attracted to the same sex, because then now that's a different ball game altogether, where we don't want our children to get. So the fact that our children, let them know that it is normal, and we acknowledge it's normal for them to be attracted. But then when is intimacy for? And I like what you said, it's the greatest way of showing up, love, deepest love for one another, and it's done in the right place. So yes, sex is not bad, but sex has its right time. And we had it from Janice, who has been there, done it, and now that's her voice this afternoon. So very nice to have you, Janice. And
thank you, Pauline, for having me.
So thank you I'm happy we reconnected after high school, so many years, and to come and just for us to share. So let's keep up the conversation, and we look forward to coming to you next time. So God bless. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye.